Hello and welcome back to this mysterious Manor saga that we have going on that really exposes the bizarreness of my mind. So part 1 was the build, part 2 we began this story, so if you haven't watched part 2 you should probably go and do that, otherwise you're not going to know what's happening, what's going on. But we met our cast last time and we have Biodiversity Bernard, Absent Anna, and I've added Callum in here and we're going to call him Cursed Callum. For reasons. But let's just have a very quick recap of what happened last time. She doesn't like the house and can't settle. He's acting all bizarre after becoming fixated on some pond water experiments, and he's been distant father while realizing that his family isn't well. So we left Bernard last time, who's realized that he actually needs to have a conversation with his wife to figure out what is going on with her and what is going on with their son in this house, who both seem to be acting a bit bizarre. So we're going to hop right in here to the library, which is the first room we're going to do in this episode. And this is a very grand 2-story room, very classically dark wood and sort of foresty green. It has a rather flaunty nature mural, which is CC wallpaper from the Tiny Travelers collection, I believe. But we're going to put in some double height bookcases from Felix's Chateau set, which have these metal poles and ladders to access the upper bookshelves. Quite Beauty and the Beast style, where the ladder just like rolls on these poles. But I'm going to customize these a little bit by using some curtain rails and sort of nudging them around with the tool mod to extend the railing to reach some upper windows and other shelving that we're going to add in this room. And we're going to split this room into 3 different sections: the sort of bookcase area, a sort of sitting and studying area with a nice comfy chair in it, and then we're going to have a set of ladders which are going to go up to a sort of balcony, desk, more work orientated area, and then the staircases in the middle of this room lead to the attic, which we will reach later in this video. But today you may have noticed that we find a secret door in the library, and to find out what that is there for we're going to need to return to the story. So, to discuss Callum's concerning change of behaviour and instability, Bernard asked to speak with Anna in this library, where Callum is not allowed to venture because he cannot be trusted yet, he's too young. And Anna seemed to Bernard that she was actually improving, or at least she appeared that way. Bernard felt that she had instead perhaps found some unstable crutches to mask that she wasn't doing very well. He asked if she perhaps wanted to return to her nursing job and they could enroll Callum in a public school rather than homeschooling him, but Anna said no, and she explained that she and Callum were having a lot of fun during his lessons, and although she found her life could be quite lonely at times, she'd adapted, and she felt like she was on the right path and she was where she was meant to be, doing what she was meant to be doing. Bernard, who didn't believe in things such as a predestined purpose, didn't challenge her. Instead, he questioned her about Callum. So, Callum, their son, was declining, and he wondered what made her say he was having fun during their lessons. To Bernard, the boy barely spoke a word anymore, just stared and jittered and turned pale as a sheet for no apparent reason. Bernard would find himself sometimes halfway through his work, he'd feel a tingle in his spine, then turn around to find Callum just staring at him with a look somewhat between shock and fright. Apparently though, he did speak to Anna, a lot in fact, but when Bernard inquired about what, Anna seemed hesitant to say. She somewhat shrugged off the question, stating that they discussed many things around the subjects of their lessons. Callum asked a lot of questions about how things worked, and if Anna didn't know the answer, they would ask what-if questions and speculate. And after asking what exactly Callum could be asking Anna, to which she didn't know the answer, Anna changed the subject in quite an unsubtle and jarring way. Oddly, she asked if Bernard had noticed the cushion in the chair behind her. And reading the confusion on his face, she went right ahead and explained that it had moved since the beginning of their conversation. Now, Bernard didn't know how to respond to this, and he didn't. That was the end of their conversation. Anna left with a bizarre and knowing smile, informing him before she closed the door that it was this house, the grounds even. Now, nothing Callum had done had disturbed Bernard more than this interaction with his wife, and as sudden as her nonsensical proclamation about the cushion, their roles reversed. Over the coming weeks, she swept through the house with such comfort and familiarity, it was as though she'd always lived there, and Bernard became the recluse, sticking to his library studying not biodiversity, but psychology, postpartum depression to trauma response to paranoia to personality disorders to psychosis to schizophrenia. Something was wrong with Anna, and she was passing it to Callum during their discussions, of that he was sure. Bernard became far more aware of their whereabouts throughout the day, suddenly tuning in to the sound of every mumbled discussion the pair were having, trying to make out specific words while also somewhat hoping not to. He was avoidant and questioned if his research was to actually help them, or just to make himself feel as though he possessed some form of control. So we'll have a little look at this finished library. Moving on to the bedroom, which is in the middle of the landing area, looking out over the entry. And we're going to return to more of a style of the main areas of the house in this, with tiles and panels, but a little more subdued with its use of colour. We're going to come back in with those wall decals, I still don't know how to say that. Also, I'm going to add some filled-in windows as a kind of historic feature above the bed where they were presumably replaced by newer ones at some point. We're going to keep this still quite grand though. We're going to make an old fireplace and seating area rather than have this just solely be a room with a bed in it. And then the small room to the side is going to be sort of like a simple walk-in wardrobe. And this is the room where Bernard eventually confronted his wife and son, where he could hear them having a discussion, which stopped instantly as he showed himself in the doorway. And Anna seemed to possess a smile Bernard could only describe as manic, whereas Callum was stone-faced. So, in the bedroom, Bernard had noticed more and more flowers appearing over the recent weeks, and Anna said their scent warded off bad energy and promoted peaceful sleep. She appeared to just have added another vase which he hadn't seen before. So realising that he would perhaps glean more from them if he spoke on their level, Bernard asked if they had noticed anything odd about the house. And he asked this specifically because he didn't really want them to be able to dodge the question. He wanted to ask them something directly that had a very simple response. So Callum remained silent. However, Anna began to reel off a list of items she had apparently been logging, how some of them had not just moved but changed to other items entirely. Now, Bernard had prepared himself for her to tell some kind of story about ghosts or spirits or even some kind of a belief in the demonic. That wasn't it. Her belief, which she didn't seem to appear to find alarming in any way, was that the house itself was somehow alive, sentient, decision-making. She placed flowers, not because it warded off bad energy, but because she had convinced herself that the house possessed some kind of sense of decor preference, and it liked the flowers. As Anna freely just shared her delusions, Callum glared at her with a commanding frown, which she didn't seem to notice, but Bernard did. And his incorrect assumption became clear. Anna wasn't the origin of these theories, it was Callum. His stern look was that of a hierarchical leader, and she was following him, subscribing to some kind of childish fantasy. Callum was the one moving objects. Bernard had watched him do it in multiple locations. His bizarre, repetitive behaviours of altering the environment, like that in his samples of pond water, and a suffocating panic came over Bernard. Had Callum been progressing his tests beyond those bowls of water? To Anna? An experiment to see how she responded to environmental change, logging the results, seeing how far he could push her, seeing what he could make her believe? Those were the conversations she'd spoken about, the things that she couldn't answer, the what-ifs and the speculations. But Bernard couldn't believe that. That would not just be a disorder, but psychopathy. Feigning knowledge, Bernard asked Callum directly if he also believed that the house was alive. Callum, in response, said this: "The house is changing, but it will not adapt." And now we're going to move to the bathroom, which is the final room on this level. We're going to find it at the end of the corridor, and we're going to split this up with some of Pierre-Sim's anti-Vera partitions, which really give that sort of old dark wood and frosted glass vibe. We're going to use some more of Felix's estate set for the toilet, because it has that old chain flush on it. And we're going to build in a sort of newer shower with some more modern tiling, which has presumably been installed more recently as showers rose up to take over bathtubs in modern bathrooms. But we're going to go back to Anna here, and Anna continued to observe the house and its items. She'd felt alone for a really long time, but knowing that Callum now too also noticed the changes happening around them provided her with comfort that she didn't have before. She knew that Bernard considered her to be insane, but she didn't care. She knew what she knew, and she knew that he was just as much a puppet in the house as the objects that would move around as though attached to strings and levers. She suspected that it was in Bernard's best interest for him to actually stay oblivious, to not see or question. That was why, whenever the house began to wake or sleep, and he would remain blissfully unaware, she made sure not to act any differently. She didn't know if he would always remain blind, or if, someday, he would slowly realise, as she and Callum had. But for now, it was just the two of them, trying to figure it all out. And she didn't wish to force Bernard through that initial moment of being paralysed in fright as the house changed something before his conscious eyes. She pretended, for Callum's sake, that she wasn't afraid. Secretly, Anna had become interested in the bathroom as somewhat of a place to get away whenever the house was having one of these moments of alteration. It seemed to have very little interest in the room, rarely affecting anything within it. Typically, she felt compelled to enter and leave as swiftly as possible, should she need the facilities, feeling a sense that the house didn't want her to be in there. But when the house slept, and the energies waned for a period, it was the only room in which she truly felt constant and in control. She would spend what felt like hours in there, looking out of the window, performing acts of mental gymnastics to attempt to fathom the life she now lived, whatever the reason was for all that was happening. She was thankful to at least have an intuitive son. Callum had painted a picture with his theories so complete, with such little life experience, that it was really a marvel. He was the one who had also warned her not to do anything too extreme while the house slept, nor to move anything back to its original spot. He told her the house did not like it and would wake up with greater strength to move things back again. So, sticking to his advice, she had little to do in the bathroom other than think, which she did a lot. Now, to finish off Act 2, we're going to enter the attic level for the first time, and we're going to do quite a large room up here, which is a corridor that Bernard has converted into a sort of grow room space for his biodiversity samples. And we're going to start with making a shelving system with some little vivariums of it in one of the small peripheral rooms around this corridor. We're using some glass boxes and plants, and we're going to use the OMSP shelf mod here for some easier placement. This is going to be the most customized room so far. We're going to sort of build up a bunch of plant grow tables from scratch in this central area using some of the Felix rustic tables and just a bunch of foliage and things. And the walls here are going to be different. They're going to be what I consider sort of insulating panels in white to help bounce the light around and keep the heat in. It was looking a bit, not very lab-like, and I wanted to add a bit more realism here. And we're also going to add a bunch of grow lights in this room since it doesn't get much natural light. We're also going to install like a whole system of water irrigation with a water tank and overhead pipes and ventilation, airflow, heating, like all of it. We're really going extra with this one. But back to the story, and realizing that Callum was actually the one exacerbating Anna's delusions, Bernard needed to confront him privately. So Callum had become old enough for Bernard to somewhat trust him with his main wildlife samples up in this attic grow lab, and frequently assisted in tending to the little recreations of biodiversity. Now, granted, his trust in Callum had drastically waned recently, but he tried not to show it. And while tending to some of the plants, Bernard asked him what he had meant about the house not adapting. He expected Callum to resist, but oddly, he seemed rather unbothered, perhaps sensing that his long experiment around the house had been clocked and already prepared to call it quits. That's what Bernard hoped. Of course, he was wrong. Instead, Callum doubled down, stating that the house did change, but Bernard couldn't see it. At which point, Bernard somewhat snapped, telling Callum that he'd seen him moving objects around the house. He accused him of toying with Anna, and he didn't know if Callum thought that his experiments in the house was some kind of natural progression of research, or if he was just pranking her. But in science, there were ethics, not to experiment on other people. It wasn't okay. It wasn't moral. He ordered Callum to stick to his bowls of pond water, or he would be banned from assisting Bernard from now on. Bernard wasn't sure if it was the fact he had truly called Callum's bluff, or simply the change in his tone, but the aura of confident knowing that Callum so frequently fashioned these days melted away, and his son began to cry. It was this moment in which Bernard's instincts to care and empathise for his son, discarding all sternness, took over, and he would later come to regret. For now, he knelt down, took Callum gently by the wrists and asked him to talk and be honest. With sniffling, broken speech, Callum told Bernard that he wasn't the one changing things in the house. Something else was doing it, and he was just moving things to help, doing what it wanted, because if he helped it, it didn't stay as long, and he wanted it to all go away. He sobbed that he was trying, but the house wasn't getting any better. Bernard listened, panicked, scared, but trying to shove his emotions to the back of his mind. He just wanted to solve all of this, whatever it was, whatever it took, get his wife and son back. He asked if Callum wanted to leave the house, to move somewhere else. Callum told him no, because it was already too late. But when Bernard pressed for more information, Callum once again resisted. He told Bernard that he couldn't tell him anything more, not just because he could barely control his breathing by this point, but because he didn't want to, and Bernard needed to just believe him. But Bernard didn't. Bernard just thought he was in way above his head and needed to contact a medical professional. Noting that he would get little more from Callum in this panicked state, he told him to go and rest. Then, left alone, Bernard replayed the conversation in his head. The first time of many. He didn't know yet, but it would plague him for a long time, wondering what he could have said differently, what might have changed the outcome. Callum may have already thought it was too late, but for Bernard, it wasn't. But soon, that would change. And that is where we're going to leave part 3, on a little bit of a cliffhanger, which I'm not sorry for. Part 4 will be out later this week. I still really want to know what you guys think of this. I know some people commented last time, thank you very much. I'm having quite a lot of fun, and I'm interested to see how and if the ending will land next episode. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Be kind to yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.